Morning friends, I am Captain Dr. D.K. Ramawat, working as a non-invasive cardiologist at Ramawat Heart and General Medicine Hospital, Badmer, Rajasthan, India. Today we are going to deal with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy part 2, as we have already discussed hypertrophic cardiomyopathy part 1 in last chapter. Today we are going to take part 2 of HCM, and I am sure that you will enjoy this part. It is also very important as part 1. So we are taking part 2 of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. We were earlier in part 1 we were taking the international guidelines for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy recommendation according to American College of Cardiology and American Heart Association of 2003 and 2011 guidelines for HCM. And in this, now we are continuing it, and we have come at the point of pharmacologic management of HCM. Now the class 1 recommendation for pharmacological management is beta blocking drugs for the treatment of symptoms like angina or dyspnea in adult patients with obstructive or non-obstructive HCM, and titrate the dose to a resting heart rate of less than 60 to 65 beats per minute. If symptomatic, then up to generally accepted and recommended maximum dosage advised. Second pharmacology drug is verapamil therapy, starting in low dosage and titrating up to 480 mg per day is recommended for the treatment of symptoms like angina and dyspnea in HCM who do not respond to beta blocking drugs or do not tolerate. But you must exercise caution in patients with high gradients, advanced heart failure, sinus bradycardia. Then number 3rd point, pharmacological intravenous phenylephrine for another pure vasoconstricting agent recommended for treatment of acute hypotension in obstructive HCM which is not responsive to IV fluids. Then second A classification, add disopyramide to a beta blocking drug or verapamil in the treatment of symptoms like angina or dyspnea in patients with obstructive HCM who do not respond to beta blocking drugs or verapamil alone. Now the oral diuretics recommended in patients with non-obstructive HCM when dyspnea persists despite beta blocker or verapamil or their combination. Now I am going to take you again the pharmacological drugs. So we are taking the beta blocking drug might be useful in the treatment of symptoms like angina or dyspnea in children also or adolescents also with HCM. But patients treated with these drugs should be monitored for side effects, including what side effects? Depression number 1, fatigue number 2, third is impaired scholastic with educational performance. Then the oral diuretics with caution to patients with obstructive HCM when congestive symptoms persist despite the use of beta blockers or verapamil or their combination. Angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor or angiotensin receptor blockers in the treatment of symptoms like angina or dyspnea in patients with HCM with preserved systolic function means what? Diastolic dysfunction. Preserved systolic function means diastolic dysfunction is not well established, and these drugs should be used cautiously if at all in patients with resting or provocable LVOT obstruction. Then the fourth drug, in patients with HCM who do not tolerate verapamil or in whom verapamil is contraindicated, diltiazem, which is non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker, may be considered. Then we should know what are the harmful drugs. This is the class third recommendation. What are the harmful drugs? Number one, nifedipine or other dihydropyridine calcium channel blocking drugs are potentially harmful for HCM patients with resting or probable LVOT obstruction. Then the verapamil is potentially harmful in patients with obstructive HCM in the setting of systemic hypotension or severe dyspnea at rest. Then digitalis is potentially harmful in the treatment of dyspnea in patients with HCM and in the absence of atrial fibrillation. Forget not, digitalis is given only when the atrial fibrillation is present. It is harmful without atrial fibrillation. The use of disopyramide alone without beta blocker or verapamil is potentially harmful in HCM with atrial fibrillation because disopyramide increases the ventricular rate during episodes of atrial fibrillation. Then the fifth point, harmful drugs, dopamine, dobutamine, norepinephrine and intravenous positive inotropic drugs are potentially harmful for the treatment of acute hypertension in patients with obstructive HCM. Now I am going to take you invasive therapy recommendations. In class 1, in invasive therapy, class 1 is septal reduction therapy. Should be performed only by experienced operators in the context of a comprehensive, extensive HCM clinical program. It should be done only by experienced operators in the context of a comprehensive, extensive HCM clinical program and only for treatment of eligible patients with severe drug-refractory symptoms and LVOT obstruction. Then class 1 secondary recommendation for invasive, consultation with centers experienced in performing both surgical septal myomectomy and alcohol septal ablation is reasonable. Discussing treatment options for eligible patients with HCM with severe drug-refractory symptoms and LVOT obstruction. Then second, surgical septal myomectomy is the first consideration for the majority of eligible patients with HCM with severe drug-refractory symptoms and LVOT obstruction. Then the third, surgical septal myomectomy can be beneficial in symptomatic children with HCM and severe resting obstruction. Means severe obstruction means more than 50 millimeter of mercury for whom standard medical therapy has failed. And when surgery is contraindicated or the risk is considered unacceptable because of serious comorbidities like advanced age, alcohol septal ablation performed in experienced centers can be beneficial in eligible adult patients with HCM with left ventricular outflow tract obstruction and severe drug refractory symptoms of heart failure. Usually New York Heart Association functional class SAC 3rd and 4th. Now I am going to take you in invasive class secondary recommendation, alcohol septal ablation when performed in experienced centers may be considered as an alternative to surgical myomectomy. For eligible adults, patients with HCM with severe drug refractory symptoms and LVOT obstruction, after a balanced and thorough discussion, and the patient expresses a preference for septal ablation. The effectiveness of alcohol septal ablation is uncertain. In patients with marked more than 30 mm septal hypertrophy, and therefore the procedure is generally discouraged. Then class 3rd recommendation, invasive therapy not done. Remember, invasive therapy not done. Septal reduction therapy should not be done who are asymptomatic with normal exercise tolerance or whose symptoms are controlled or minimized on optimal medical therapy. Then septal reduction therapy should not be done unless performed as a part of program dedicated to the longitudinal, lengthwise and multidisciplinary several academic care of patients with HCM. Mitral valve replacement for relief of alveolar obstruction should not be performed in patients with HCM in whose septal reduction therapy is an option. Alcohol septal ablation should not be done in patients with HCM with concomitant disease that independently warrants surgical correction. For example, coronary artery bypass grafting for CAD, mitral valve repair for ruptured chordina, in whom surgical myomectomy can be performed as a part of the operation. Alcohol septal ablation should not be done in patients with HCM who are less than 21 years of age and is discouraged in adults less than 40 years of the age if myomectomy is a viable, feasible option. Now I am going to take you the pacing of HCM. When to do pacing. Class 2nd A recommendation. In patients with HCM who have had dual chamber device implanted for non-HCM indications. In patients with HCM who have had a dual chamber device implanted for non-HCM indications, it is reasonable to consider a trial of ventricular pacing from the right ventricular apex for the relief of symptoms attributable to alveolar obstruction. Class 2nd B recommendation. Permanent pacing may be considered medically refractory symptomatic patients with obstructive HCM who are suboptimal, less than the highest standard candidate for septal reducing therapy. Then the class 3rd recommendation, pacing is not indicated. Remember, pacing is not indicated. Permanent pacemaker implantation for patients with HCM who are asymptomatic or whose symptoms are medically controlled, it is not indicated. Then permanent pacemaker implantation should not be performed as a first-line therapy to relieve symptoms in medically refractory symptomatic patients with HCM or alveolar obstruction in patients who are candidates for septal reduction by surgical myomectomy or alcohol ablation. So, now I am taking you to management of HCM. The map key of the management. Suppose a patient is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, then first treat comorbidities according to guidelines, that is, treat hypertension, treat lipid profile, treat diabetes mellitus, and if you find obstructive physiology, then avoid vasodilator therapy and high dosage diuretics. And if you find heart failure symptoms or symptoms of angina, then you have to go for annual clinical evaluation for 12 to 18 months in children, adolescents, and every 5 years in adults. And when the symptoms are of heart failure and angina, then go for beta blocker, verapamil and disopyramide drugs. And if they even persist symptoms, then go for invasive therapy. So first go for, if the patient accepts surgical condition, then go for surgical myomectomy, and if he does not accept the surgical condition, then go for this the alcohol ablation, and if he does not accept alcohol ablation, then go for the pacing. And supposing there are no symptoms of heart failure or symptoms of angina, they are not present, Then see the systolic function. If systolic function is poor, means LVF is less than 50%, then therapy as outlined in the heart failure guidelines should be taken. And if the left ventricular ejection fraction is more than 50%, then beta blocker, verapamil, disopyramide, diuretic, ACE inhibitor or ARB should be given. And if you find that heart failure symptoms or angina symptoms are not present, then you go for annual clinical evaluation for 12 to 18 months in children and adolescents and every 5 years in adults. And these are the rules for the treatment guidelines. Now I am going to take you sudden cardiac death risk stratification in SCM. Class 1 recommendation for sudden cardiac death. All patients with HCM should undergo comprehensive sudden cardiac death risk stratification at initial evaluation to determine the presence of what? The personal history for ventricular fibrillation, sustained VT or sudden cardiac death events, including appropriate ICD therapy for ventricular tachyarrhythmias. Then second point, you must see a family history for sudden cardiac death events, including appropriate ICD therapy for ventricular tachyarrhythmias. Then you must find out unexplained syncope in the family. Then find out documented non-sustained VT defined as 3 or more beats or greater than or equal to 120 beats per minute on ambulatory means Holter electrocardiogram. Then lastly, you must go for maximum LV wall thickness greater than or equal to 30 mm. Now, class secondary recommendation for sudden cardiac death, it is reasonable to assess blood pressure response during exercise as a part of sudden cardiac death risk stratification in patients with HCM. Second, sudden cardiac death risk stratification is reasonable on a periodic basis every 12 to 24 months for patients with HCM who have not undergone ICD implantation but would otherwise be eligible in the event that risk factors are identified. Now, the major sudden cardiac death risk factors and modifiers used in current guidelines and putative means what is generally accepted risk factors and generally accepted risk factors described in the literature but not included in current guidelines. So we will read and understand and discuss all the two, means we will also discuss current guidelines and which is used nowadays, and putative risk factors, they are risk markers which are not used in current guidelines because they are also important to know. First point we are taking, major sudden cardiac death risk factors, they are 5 in number. Number 1, family history of sudden cardiac death. This is according to what? 2003 American College of Cardiology and European Society of Cardiology, and 2011 American College of Cardiology Foundation and American Heart Association guidelines. According to this, these are the 5 points. Number 1, family history of sudden cardiac death. Second, unexplained syncope. Number 3, severe left ventricular hypertrophy. Number 4, non-sustained VT. Number 5, abnormal blood pressure response to exercise. Then the second point, potential sudden cardiac death risk modalities, modifiers. Potential sudden cardiac death risk modifiers which modifies, make the change in that sudden cardiac death. They are 5 in number. Number 1, left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. Number 2, left gadolinium enhancement on MRI imaging, means what is the fibrosis, fibrosis, how much is the fibrosis in the heart. it is seen by late gadolinium enhancement. Then general mutations, then genetic mutations we have to see, whether it is sarcomeric or non-sarcomeric protein mutation, we have to find out this. Then left ventricular apical aneurysm has to be seen. Then end stage phase of HCM means ejection fraction is less than 50%. So first we have seen the major site, sudden cardiac death risk factors. Then we have seen the potential sudden cardiac death risk modifier. And third, we are taking additional sudden cardiac death risk factors, which is obtained from 2014 European Society of Cardiology guidelines. There are two in number. Number one, increased left atrial diameter. It occurs in diastolic dysfunction and severe heart failure. Increased left atrial diameter means end stage of heart failure, and young age at the evolution. Young age at the evolution. Then putative that generally accepted sudden cardiac death risk markers. These are the risk markers. They are seventh in number. Number first, paced ventricular electrocardiogram fractionation. What is fractionation? QRS fractionation are markers of greater atrialization of right ventricular volume. Fractionated sinus rhythm ECG are associated with slow conduction, which may be a substrate for reentrant VT. So, paced ventricular electrocardiogram fractionation we have to see. Then QRS fragmentation on ECG. What is fragmentation? Fragmented QRS means presence of notching of R or S wave in the presence of narrow QRS. It indicates heterogeneous depolarization of ventricular myocardium that occur due to ischemia, fibrosis, scar, or a marker of coronary microcirculation dysfunction. Then we have to see there are markers are exercise-induced non-sustained VT and ventricular fibrillation. Then severe obstructive coronary disease is also a marker. Then microvascular ischemia is a marker. Then mid-ventricular obstruction is a marker. Then atrial fibrillation is also a marker. Now I am going to take you, one point remained in the last slide. Invasive electrophysiological testing as routine should not be performed because of sudden cardiac death risk in patient with HCM. This was from the slide which I have just seen. And now I will show you sudden cardiac death in HCM. What are the causes and how we treat? Non-sustained VT, resting at rest or exercise. Fibrosis or scar causing VT. Severity of LV hypertrophy. Abnormal exercise blood pressure response means hypertension. Outflow obstruction. You see blood from LV going to aorta, but so much thickness, so there is obstruction in outflow grade obstruction, outflow, ventricular outflow, there is obstruction. Unexplained syncope due to obstruction in LVOT. Then family history of sudden death is associated with heart failure and sudden death. Then you know sarcomeric myofilament protein mutation, you must know, should be there. Role of isolated myofilament mutation means sarcomeric myofilament protein mutation, that is a sign of HCM. Now I am going to take you selection of patient for implantable cardioverter defibrillator in HCM. Class 1 recommendation, ICD in HCM is major documented. Number 1, cardiac arrest. Number 2, ventricular fibrillation. Number 3, hemodynamically significant VT. Class secondary recommendation, it is reasonable to recommend an ICD for patients with SCM with what? Sudden death presumably caused by SCM in one or more first degree relatives. First degree relatives means father, mother or brother and sisters. Then a maximum LV wall thickness greater than or equal to 30 mm. Then third, one or more recent unexplained syncopal episodes. Number 2, it is reasonable where an ICD can be useful in selected patients with non-sustained VT, particularly those less than 30 years of age, in the presence of other sudden cardiac death risk factors or modifiers or markers when present. Number 3, an ICD can be useful in selected patients with SCM with an abnormal blood pressure response with exercise in conventional risk markers, which we have seen already. Now, what are the conventional risk markers? Family history of sudden death due to hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, unexplained recent syncope, multiple repetitive non-sustained VT on ambulatory ECG, hypotensive or attenuated blood pressure response to exercise, massive left ventricular hypertrophy, thickness more than 30 mm. Then lastly, but not the least, extensive and diffuse late gadolinium enhancement fibrosis. Number 4, it is reasonable to recommend an ICD for high-risk children with SCM based on unexplained syncope, massive atrophy or family history of sudden cardiac death. Now I am going to take you. The usefulness of ICD is uncertain. ICD is not useful, or still we could not evaluate whether it is useful or no. Number 1, the usefulness of an ICD is uncertain in patients with SCM with isolated bursts of non-sustained VT when in absence of any other sudden cardiac death risk factors or modifiers are present. Second, the usefulness of an ICD is uncertain in patients with SCM with an abnormal blood pressure response with exercise when in the absence of any other sudden cardiac death risk factor or modifiers present, particularly in the presence of significant aortic obstruction. Then LVOT obstruction risk is positively correlated with severity of VAR obstruction. There is severity just like VAR obstruction. A limitation to using LVOT obstruction as an independent risk marker is that the obstruction in SCM is dynamic. Obstruction in SCM is dynamic and highly variable. Obstruction is highly variable from hours to hours. Obstruction is highly variable from hours to hour to the extent that no gradient may be detectable during one evaluation. Sometimes you may not see that there is gradient. Normally in healthy heart there is no gradient, but in SCM gradient is always present, but a time may come when you don't find any gradient. So, you have to see it very minutely whether there is gradient or not. Now, late gadolinium enhancement on MRI imaging recommendation. Late gadolinium enhancement presents myocardial fibrosis or scarring and scarred myocardium, which is prone to ventricular tachyarrhythmia. However, late gadolinium enhancement has not been associated with clinical sudden cardiac death events or ICD discharge in published studies and has lower positive predictive value to predict heart failure. Also, studies are required to reach a consensus general agreement regarding appropriate imaging protocols and threshold, a door for detection of late gadolinium enhancement. Then left ventricular apical aneurysm. In this case also we advise that MRI, a subset of patients with SCM where means 2% only. A subset of patients SCM prevalent in 2% develop a thin-walled LV apical aneurysm associated with regional scarring and more adverse clinical events during follow-up, including progressive heart thought, means heart is stressed in this case due to scarring, and into the end stage phase, as well as sudden cardiac death notate. You must know apical aneurysm can be stressed with scarring. It is stressed and it can cause the end stage of heart failure and causes sudden cardiac death. So now I am taking you genetic mutations, not recommended. When sudden cardiac death may cluster in certain families and specific sarcomere mutation may confer sudden cardiac death risk. However, the data is inadequate and routine mutational screening is not recommended for prognosis in SCM to confirm the sudden cardiac death. Then class 3rd, ICD is harmful when it is harmful. ICD placement as a routine strategy in patient without an indication of increased risk potentially harmful. Without the ICD placement as a routine strategy in patient without an indication of increased risk, it is harmful. Don't place. Then ICD placement as a strategy to permit patients with SCM to participate in competitive athletics is potentially harmful. Then ICD placement in patients who have an identified SCM genotype. Genotype means genetic constitution of an organism inherited from both parents. So ICD placement in patients who have an identified SCM genotype in the absence of clinical manifestations of SCM is potentially harmful. Then recommendation of participation in competitive or recreational sports and physical activity. When to do, when to participate. It is reasonable for patients with SCM to participate in low intensity competitive sports. For example, golf and bowling means throwing ball in cricket. Then it is reasonable for patients with SCM to participate in a range of recreational sporting activities. Now I am going to take same. Participation in competitive or recreational sport and physical activity is not recommended. Here it is not recommended when patients with SCM should not participate in intense competitive sport regardless of age, sex, race, if there is presence or absence of LVT obstruction, prior septal reduction therapy or implantation of a cardioverter defibrillator for high risk status. Then don't allow them. Then management of atrial fibrillation. First indication, anticoagulation with vitamin K antagonist like warfarin to an international normalized ratio of 2 to 3 is indicated in patients with paroxysmal persistent or chronic atrial fibrillation, and SCM anticoagulation with direct thrombin inhibitor like dabigatran may present another option to reduce the risk of thromboembolic events, but data of dabigatran for patients with SCM are not available. Then ventricular rate control in patients with SCM with atrial fibrillation is indicated for rapid ventricular rate and can require high dosage of beta antagonist like carvedilol and metoprolol and non-diiodopyridine calcium channel blockers like diltiazem and verapamil. Then second A recommendation of atrial fibrillation, disopyramide with ventricular rate controlling agent and amiodarone are reasonable antiarrhythmic agents for atrial fibrillation patients with HCM. Then radiofrequency ablation for atrial fibrillation can be beneficial in patients with HCM who have refractory symptoms or who are unable to take antiarrhythmic drugs. Now, the MAGE procedure. It is a surgical procedure. The MAGE procedure with closure of left atrial appendages. Closure of left atrial appendages is reasonable in patients with SCM with a history of atrial fibrillation, either during septal myomectomy or an isolated procedure in selected patients. Then second is recommendation, sotalol, dofetilide and dronedarone might be considered alternatively antiarrhythmic agents in patients with HCM, especially in those with an ICD, but clinical experience is limited. In pregnancy delivery, the recommendation for HCM, class 1 recommendation for pregnancy and delivery. In women with HCM who are asymptomatic or symptoms controlled with beta-blocking drugs, the drug should be continued, and increased surveillance. We should watch increased surveillance for fetal bradycardia or other complications is warranted. For patient's mother or father with HCM, genetic counseling warranted before planned conception. In women with HCM and resting or provocable LVOT obstruction greater than or equal to 50 mm of the mercury and or cardiac symptoms not controlled by medical therapy alone, patients should be referred to a knowledgeable high-risk obstetrician. The diagnosis of HCM among asymptomatic women is not a contraindication for pregnancy, but patients should be carefully evaluated, assessed in regard to risk of pregnancy. Class secondary recommendation for women with HCM whose symptoms are controlled. If they are mild to moderate, pregnancy is reasonable, but expert maternal fetal medical specialist care, including cardiovascular and prenatal monitoring, is advised. Class 3rd recommendation for women with advanced heart failure symptoms, pregnancy is associated with excess morbidity and mortality. Now I am going to take you Indian perspective and Indian data on hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. With only approximately 4,000 cardiologists for a populous country like India, the ratio of cardiologists to cardiac patients is poor. The other challenge faced by cardiologists is to keep abreast with advances in diagnosis and management for a heterogeneous disease such as HCM, so distinctly different from CAD. I again repeat, the other challenge faced by cardiologists is to keep abreast with advances in diagnosis and management for a heterogeneous disease such as HCM, so distinctly different from CAD. Currently, expertise in HCM is underdeveloped in India, and there are no established multidisciplinary centers specifically designed for the systematic assessment of patients with their disease. The recent initiatives include those at Amrita Institute in Kochi, Kerala, Osmania University, Hyderabad in South India, Kalra Hospital at New Delhi, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences at New Delhi, the Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education Research, Chandigarh in the north. To date, most Indian research activity in HCM has been in basic molecular science with identification of pathogenic mutations, echocardiographic findings, BFC, and interventional means percutaneous reduction of outflow obstruction by alcohol ablation, largely in lieu of the surgical myomectomy option we have done. Now I am going to take you the epidemiological data in India and studies in hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. In a study by Hodke et al. Over 15 years period from 1985 to 2000, primary cardiomyopathy was diagnosed in 101 cases, and at autopsy, out of which 14 cases were HCM. In all cases, congenital heart disease, ischemic heart disease, valvular deformities, and hypertension were ruled out. 14 cases of HCM comprised 13.9% of all cardiomyopathy cases. As documented in other series, the chief presenting symptoms were dyspnea, angina, and palpitations. Sudden death was seen in 6 of the 14 patients, and in this study, in 3 of the 6 patients, cardiac arrhythmia was documented. In another study and on etiology of congestive heart failure among the 31 patients, 16 means 51.6% males had dilated cardiomyopathy, the contributing cause being alcohol. Dilated cardiomyopathy was due to taking the alcohol, and these patients had hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy as a cause of heart failure. Now, and an increased male preponderance was observed with the sex ratio being 3.7 in male and 1 in female. The age at onset was found to be more than a decade early in familial cases. In familial cases, the age was 30 compared to non-familial, where age was 44. The chi-square test analysis, also called X-square test, revealed obstructive HCM to be following autosomal dominant mode of inheritance. Autosomal dominant mode of inheritance, whereas non-obstructive HCM was significantly deviating. This obstructive group may be considered as an admixture wherein genes, modifiers, and environmental variables may be contributing to the heterogeneity. In non-obstructive means non-familial. Now I am going to take you at the genetics of HCM. There are 4 types of modes for a disease seen. Number 1, autosomal dominant. Number 2, autosomal recessive. Number 3, X-linked dominant. Number 4, X-linked recessive. So first we take autosomal dominant. Don't skip generations, means even in second generation disease do not skip the son and daughter, and affected parents can have unaffected children. And in this autosomal dominant diseases are: number 1, our hypertrophic cardiomyopathy; number 2, Huntington's disease; number 3, achondroplasia. And if you see autosomal dominant, father is affected, mother is affected, but son is not affected. So affected parents can have unaffected children. And now if we see autosomal recessive, skips generation, means disease skips in son or daughter of first generation and reappear in grandson or granddaughter. And here unaffected parents can have affected children. And the examples for such type of autosomal recessive diseases are cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease, and HCM reported in rare families also. Then we can take this autosomal recessive. You see, unaffected parents can have affected children. Now unaffected parents, both father and mother, can have affected daughter. You see. Then third we take X-linked dominant. Disease never transfer from father to son. All daughters of an affected father will be affected. You see, X-linked dominant, disease never transfer from father to son. Father is affected, but son are not affected. Never transfer. And all daughters are affected with the father. And then all daughters of an affected father will be affected. And disease never transfer from father to son. Never transfer father to son, and all daughters are affected. And mother's genes are transferred in healthy son. Then last, the fourth but not the least, X-linked recessive. Males are more affected. Disease tends to transfer from mother to son and father to daughter. Disease never transfer from father to son. You see, disease never transfer from father to son. It is transferred from father to daughter, and mother never transfer to son. Mother transfer to son, but not to the daughter. Mother disease transfer to son, and father undiseased transfer to daughter. Father never transfer to son, mother never transfer to daughters. So it is all for the genetics of HCM and the types, 4 types of mode for a disease of genetics. Now I am going to take you one study, the epoch study of HCM, very important study. You must listen it carefully. The cohort of this study comprised HCM patients attending the Hartfield clinic who fulfilled the criteria. Number 1, age more than 12 years, referral with symptomatic heart failure patient with no hypertension or other cardiac causes which can cause hypertrophy of the left ventricle, or having proven HCM in the family and or feature suggestive of HCM on prior investigations. And third and last, clinical diagnosis of HCM in accordance with either task force guidelines or modified diagnostic criteria for HCM on the basis of standard non-invasive evaluation. Then 59 hypertrophic cardiomyopathy patients were studied with non-obstructive HCM, comparatively common, and the onset was in the late 30s. Sporadic scattered HCM was commoner and familial type were less, 18% only, and more severe manifestation. 30s sporadic HCM was commoner and familial type and had more manifestation. The study showed preponderance of HCM in male 83% with sex ratio male 5.5 and female 1 only. Some studies regarding alcohol septal ablation in Indian setting. Study by Oman et al. 6 patients, 4 men and 2 women with symptomatic hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy and inadequate response to pharmacology therapy had their major septal branches ablated with alcohol. Mean duration of follow-up was 1.5 years. There was reduction in alveolar gradient in all patients, with 100% patients had the reduction, with a mean reduction of 50 mm thickness. 2 patients developed complete heart block and 3 patients developed bifascicular block. Complete heart block persisted in 1 patient. 2 patients died within 8 days of the procedure. 1 due to cerebrovascular accident and 1 due to asystole. The patient who died of asystole had complete heart block but refused permanent pacemaker implantation. Complete heart block reverted in 1 patient and bifascicular blocks persisted in 3 patients. Clinical and electrocardiographic follow-up was achieved in the 4 surviving patients after 1 to 1.5 years. All surviving patients had alveolar gradient reduction and clinical improvement. Now, in the last but not the least, I am taking you in the study by Satyamurthy and the colleague. The study by Satyamurthy and colleague. 53 patients had undergone alcohol septal ablation and followed clinically and with ECG and transthoracic echo with mean period of 96 months. Only 4 out of 51 patients remained in New York Heart Association class 3rd or 4th at the end of 6 months. 10% of patients needed pacemaker implantation. There was significant reduction of LV output gradient from 79 to 34 mm of the mercury and reduction of septal thickness from 23 mm to 19 mm during 6 months follow-up. Beyond 6 months, there was no further decrease in either septal thickness or alveolar gradient noted. There was 92% survival at the 8 years. Pacemaker implantation and surgical procedures have been offered only to those patients who do not respond to a medical line of treatment. Currently, radio frequency ablation of the left bundle branch has been successfully carried out for patients with resistant, means macro re-entry VT. Radio frequency ablation of left bundle branch be used as palliative procedure of choice for patients with hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy who are resistant to a medical line of treatment. This would result in left bundle branch block, which in turn would cause an altered pattern of septal contraction, resulting in the reduction or elimination of left ventricle outflow tract obstruction. Such a procedure theoretically appears more physiological, safer, and cost-effective than surgery or dual chamber pacing. So, this was the end of the part 2 of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I thank you very much. I thank you very much, my colleague, for your kind attention. And I promise you that part 3rd I will produce within 7 days, and that will be more enjoyable than this part 2nd. I hope you all will attend the part 3rd. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys, for your kind attention.